So let's talk about general abuse for a little bit. And this applies to all different types of abuse, whether it's alcohol, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional. This applies as a general concept to all different abuse situations. So it's really important to remember that we never stop using Maslow when making decisions in nursing. All right? Every psych patient, okay, starts as a med-surg patient. Do not forget that. Okay, the physiology must be stable before we can start to worry about anything else. Okay, we're not worried about their spiritual stability when they're hemodynamically unstable. I'm not super worried if they're feeling loved right now or feeling comfortable right now. I'm worried about their physiology, number one. Then I'm going to safety, then comfort and love, then psychological, then social, and then spiritual. Okay, so remember, the highest priority is always physiological. Right? So just because they start the sentence or they start the question by saying, "You're a psychiatric patient," blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's a psychiatric patient, but don't forget the med-surg part. Okay, that trumps everything. So let's talk about the psychological considerations of abuse. Okay, the number one problem with abuse is denial. Okay, what is denial? Denial is the refusal to accept the reality of their problem. Okay, denial is the refusal to accept the reality of their problem. So how do you treat it? Okay, we treat denial by confronting them and pointing out the difference between what they say and what they do. Okay, we're just pointing out the difference. We're not telling them that they're wrong. Okay, all we're doing is presenting an alternate reality, and then they get to make the choice. Okay, it's just like holding up a mirror to them, okay, so that they can see what's going on. Okay, we are acting as their mirror. Again, we're not telling them they're wrong. We're just presenting an alternate reality. And when they're ready to walk through that door and they're ready to make that change and accept that when their time is right, then they're going to be able to do so. Right? So there's not right and wrong. The exception to this rule is that in loss and grief, we always allow their denial. We always support it. Okay. It is not dysfunctional when somebody is using denial in grieving. Okay. So we let them use denial in grief and we support them. So denial is the refusal to accept the reality of their problem, and we treat it by confronting them and letting them know that there's a difference between what they say and what they do. We're not judging them, but we're letting them know that there is an alternate reality from which they can choose, except for loss and grief, when we're going to support and allow their denial. Now, a second issue with abuse is dependency and codependency. And what's the difference? Okay. Dependency is when the abuser gets their partner to do things or make decisions for them. Dependency is when the abuser gets their partner or significant other to do things or make decisions for them. So this is like, can you call my boss and tell them that I'm sick today, that I have an illness and I'm not coming into work? Okay, that is dependency. Codependency is when the partner gets positive self-esteem from doing things or making decisions for the abuser. Okay. So codependency is when the partner or significant other gets positive self-esteem from doing things or making decisions for the abuser. So they feel better about themselves when they call in sick for their spouse or their partner who is not in fact sick, right? They feel like they get something out of that. So to treat dependency and codependency, we need to set limits and enforce them. Okay. So we agree in advance on what requests are going to be allowed, and then we enforce the agreement. Okay. It's something we work out with the client in a collaborative effort. And then what we do is we work on improving the self-esteem of the codependent person. Okay. We work on improving the self-esteem of the codependent person. And this can be tricky because if people who have gained all of their self-esteem and their self-value comes from being codependent upon this other person, then they are going to overlook their personal safety majority of the time. Okay, this is why people who are in abusive relationships stay in them, because there's some portion of their self-esteem that comes from that relationship, and they are not willing to give up their self-esteem, essentially their identity, to be safe. They would rather be in danger and abused than alone and lose their self-esteem. Okay, that's why it's tricky to treat, and you see people who are in abusive relationships and you don't understand why they're staying. That's why. Okay, now let's talk about manipulation. Manipulation is similar, but manipulation is when the abuser gets the codependent person to do things for them that are not in the best interests of the significant other or of the codependent person. So these are things where the nature of their request is dangerous or harmful to the significant other. Okay. So this is when, if mom asks husband, alcoholic mom asks husband to please go buy some beer for me, okay, that is not manipulation. But if alcoholic mom tells 17-year-old daughter to go buy beer for her, that is not in the best interest of the daughter, and it is not helpful for her. It is, in fact, dangerous and harmful, and therefore manipulation. So to treat manipulation, we set limits and enforce them. Set and enforce limits. Now, manipulation is easier to treat than codependency because nobody likes being manipulated. Right? Nobody wants to be manipulated. That 17-year-old girl who's buying beer for her mom doesn't like that experience if she's being manipulated. If she's just codependent and she's gaining self-esteem from that, that's one thing. But if she does not enjoy that particular experience or does not build her self-esteem, then she's being manipulated. And so it's a whole lot easier to help her because she doesn't want to be in the situation that she's in. Okay. That's why manipulation is easier to treat than codependency. Right. So those are some strategies and things that you need to keep in mind, some underlying principles that you need to keep in mind while answering questions about abuse. Like I said, whether it's alcoholic abuse, drug abuse, any kind of physical or emotional abuse, these are underlying principles that you can apply to all those other types of situations. And the last thing I want to say about this is the big thing you need to remember is don't forget about Maslow, okay? It starts with physiology. Every psych patient starts as a med-surg patient. Fix the body before you start to fix the mind and the emotions and the spirit,